Great. Hi, my name is David Lee from Reliance, and welcome to today's web conference. We're doing with Prevent Connect, Roll Red Roll, the new toolkit discussing sexual violence with student athletes. We're so glad to see so many people joining us from all around the country. We've got, looks like 500 people that have joined us. So this is a very wonderful, large gathering. Prevent Connect is a national project of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, sponsored by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The views and information provided in this web conference do not necessarily represent the official views of the United States government, the CDC, or CalCASA. Thank you. So today in our web conference, our objectives are we want you to be able to describe the Roll Red Roll college and high school toolkits and their impacts on preventing sexual violence in sport. We want people to be able to identify ways to use the Roll Red Roll college and high school toolkits with young athletes in your communities, and to be able to discuss opportunities for athletes, coaches, athletic administrators, and guidance counselors to serve as agents of social change and prevent sexual violence. We believe we all can play a role in being able to prevent sexual violence. So,
hey David, thanks for those objectives. We have a quick issue with our captioners, so I need to stop sharing my screen just for a moment to try to get this issue resolved. We want to make sure this web conference is accessible for everyone.
Okay, so thank you all for joining us. I'm going to just jump ahead and quickly introduce, while we're doing this, who some of our speakers are today. And I'll be just doing this very quickly. We have Nancy Schwartzman, who is the film director, producer, and strategist who uses storytelling and technology to create safer communities for women and girls. So thank you, Nancy, for joining us. You can say hi.
Hello.
Hi, great. Oh, okay, great. I was jumping ahead to this. I'll get to the rest of the speakers in a moment. So Reliance is a national partnership that is working to end sexual violence in one generation by advancing research, influencing policy, and supporting innovative programs, helping leaders establish safe workplaces and communities, and partnering with a range of organizations. These are just some of the organizations that we have partnered with or have supported our efforts in trying to be able to make change. Move to the next slide. And oh, great, and this captioning is working. So you please visit our website, Reliance Sport Plus Prevention Center. You'll get a lot of great resources that we have available. We've done research on the issue of looking at the role that sport can play to be part of the solution. We believe that it is important that sport play a role in being able to and can play a role in preventing sexual violence. Next slide. We've put out many reports that have information. Our first report on the far left is our general overview. We have also done 2 reports on looking at recommendations around evaluation and research, the Sport Plus Sexual Violence Prevention and Power of Support. And today we just released a next report, which is athletic trainers as leaders in sexual violence prevention. We believe that athletic trainers play an important role. And so we just released this report today, and you can get a copy of all of the reports. The link is already moving forward. Someone is still seeing the objective slide. We are sorry, we seem to be, but we are moving on to the next slide. So we do on this website list the resources that are available. We've cataloged over 100 resources available for sport to be doing sexual and domestic violence prevention work. And so if you go look at this, you can click on it and find a database. The next slide will actually just show a sample of results that we have, which includes the Roll Red Roll toolkits. And so there's just a wide range of resources that people can do throughout sport to be able to prevent sexual violence. So thank you all so much for being able to do that. Great, thank you. Next slide. Wonderful. So in addition, with Prevent Connect, we have done several other web conferences that are related to topics that are around this. So for example, We will be talking about the use of the documentary film Roll Red Roll today. We have another web conference that we have a recording available of called Storytelling for Norms Change and Community Engagement to Prevent Sexual and Intimate Partner Violence, which talks about how to be able to use storytelling in films like documentary films to create social change, so we can be able to help have them available. And we do have the slides available, and those slides will get posted in the text chat. Next slide, please.
Hey, David. It seems that folks are having some technology issues. We've got a handful of folks who are stuck on the slides. I just want to assure folks, one, we have reached meeting capacity, so we may be experiencing a bit of a lag. Two, Ashley Klein-Jimenez, thank you so much for continuing to post the link in the chat. I do want to have a quick accessibility check. I know I was still receiving messages that people could not see the captioning stream. Are folks able to see the captioning stream? If you can, please let me know yes or no in the chat. And it looks like folks who have also experienced a bit of a Zoom overload are recommending that we ask our presenters to please turn your cameras off. This might help with the overload that we're experiencing. So if you can, please turn your cameras off just so folks can join. And I'm seeing a yes and a no on captioning.
Yeah. So for captioning, you will need to click on the closed captioning button and then say show subtitles to be able to access them. Captioning is working perfectly for me, but that's just me. One of the things we've learned is that technology does not work uniformly for everyone. So we're going to keep on moving forward. It's great to see so many people here. Can we move to the next slide, please? So that during a pandemic, I'm from Oakland, California, so this is a picture of Oakland baseball, of our different cutouts of people being able to attend, having pictures of people attending games. But during the pandemic, reaching our communities and reaching athletes has taken creativity and taken new energy and finding ways to be able to move forward. This is actually a time that our teams and our athletics is more important than ever to keep connection for people. And so even if teams are not able to meet in person, meeting virtually has really been an important way of keeping communities together and having people advance. What we're going to be doing today is giving an example of using this film, which is something that can be done virtually, to be able to help engage and connect with athletes, to be able to make change and to prevent sexual violence. So we think this is a really great opportunity. So now I'm going to get a chance to quickly introduce our guests. We have Nancy Schwartzman, who already said hello. We also are joined by Coach V, who is the executive director over at Open Door Abuse Prevention. How are you doing, Coach V?
I'm well, and I'm excited to see you all. I hope all of you glean very well from this today.
Great. And we also are joined by Joe Similian, and who's the co-founder of Men Challenging. How are you doing, Joe?
Doing okay. Finally warming up here in New York City. Excited to be here.
Great. We also are joined by many members of our involved with the Roll Red Roll team. We have Eliza Licht, who is the impact producer. Hi, Eliza.
Hello, everyone.
We also have Alice Quinlan, who's the impact consultant with Roll Red Roll. Hi, Alice.
Hey, everybody. Thrilled to be here.
Great. And we have Lily Donnell, who is the impact coordinator for Roll Red Roll and has done a lot of work in help getting, as is everyone else, in getting today's web conference ready.
Hi, good to see everyone.
Thank you all. And so it's great. We're going to have each of them being able to speak a bit, but just wanted to get a chance to meet everyone here. Let's move to the next slide. So we're going to start with a polling question. So Tori's going to put out a polling question. This Roll Red Roll is a documentary film, and it was on featured in many places. I want to know how many people are familiar with it. So we have a polling. Have you never heard of it? Have you heard of it but never watched it? Have you watched it? Have you attended a screening in person or virtually, or have you hosted a screening? And so we're just going to want to see. So we're going over, and so far we've got about half of you have shared. So keep on listing the votes, and we're going to go ahead and share the results. We've got about half of you have not heard of it yet, but now 100% of you will. About 25% have heard of it but not watched it. And then another 20% of you have watched it, and 5% have or 6% have attended a screening, and 2% of the audience have actually hosted a screening in person or virtual. I know that Reliance has hosted both an in-person training at the National Sexual Assault Conference in 2019, and in April we hosted a virtual screening. And so it's really great to be able to have those opportunities. So thanks everyone there. We're gonna move the poll away. Oh, there is the screening, so you got to see the answers, but we're going to close that. Thank you. So I'm really gonna hand it over to Nancy Schwartzman, who's the director and producer of Roll Red Roll. As I had said earlier, Nancy is a Peabody nominated documentary film director, producer, and media strategist who uses storytelling and technology to create safer communities for women and girls. And she has done so many work over the years. I've known Nancy since she was a founder of Circle of Six app and other films that she's put together. And so, Nancy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone for showing up. It's so amazing. I'd see our numbers pop down by like 100, but 2 minutes ago it was 500. But it's just really, really exciting that so many people are here, and that 50% of you all have not yet seen the film, which is just, I can't wait for everyone to see it. It is available on Netflix. That would be the preferred place to get it. You can also go to pbs.org and find clips of it, but we would prefer, if everyone certainly during this pandemic has relied on Netflix, if you all have it, it is streaming there, and it's the director's cut. So it's really an honor. I get so inspired just zooming through the chat, getting to understand how many incredible people are doing such critical work, and the work that you do to prevent violence, to emphasize healthy relationships, to really fill in the gaps for what kids are not being taught in school or at home or in the larger culture. To me, it feels like really holy work and really important work. And our culture does not thank you all enough. So I just want to thank you for trying to make young people have better experiences and trying to create communities with less violence. I made Roll Red Roll after I'm a sexual assault survivor from 20 years ago, actually. And that experience, and really not just the pain and trauma of it, but the injustice of it, the injustice of like the victim carrying the burden of it, the responsibility I had to do to process my own experience and try to get people around me to understand what had happened is really what started me on my activist journey. Roll Red Roll is sort of an extension of that, in that it looks at a well-known case, the Steubenville, Ohio rape case, which was among teenage high school football players in a small town. And it was at the birth of social media. It was in 2012. So what was so staggering about this case was that the boys tweeted and, really broadcast the whole experience on social media. There are some incredible heroes in this story. Certainly a network of women, journalists, bloggers who knew what was right and not right and amplified that. And then a few really brave bystanders, actually one very brave bystander athlete. And I worked so closely with Eliza Licht and Joe Samelin, who I'm honored to get to work with for the past 15 years, and Alice and Lily on really developing out what we can take from this film and this case in terms of teachable moments. How do we empower young people, and Coach V does this so brilliantly, to be bystanders. We expect so much from our kids to do the right thing when the parents, as you'll see in this film, are not doing the right thing, when the coaches are not doing the right thing, when the radio DJs are not doing the right thing. So I wanted to show how violence against women is systemic. It is in our institutions, in our schools, on our teams, in our media. And we can't ask our young people to like have the solution when we don't teach them what the solution is and when they are steeped in this toxicity. So I really made this film to both, you know, lay bare how does perpetration work in a high school setting and in a teen setting, but also who else is responsible and where are the solutions. So I think our toolkits are full of solutions, and we're so excited that you're going to take them and run with it. So I think, and I can't wait for everyone to see it. Are we going to show a trailer now?
We sure are.
All right, let's do it.
There's pressure to get these kids guilty. Even if they're guilty of rape, but they didn't do this and that, I hope, you know, that the truth comes out.
When I first read the story, there wasn't a lot of substance to the article. 2 high school football players had been charged, just a couple of paragraphs about these 2 boys, and that was it. I thought, this is nuts because that town is so entrenched in their football team. This is big news. So that's when I started snooping around.
I had never seen a case constructed like this. That many people who have some information.
This was a sexual assault with teenagers, and the cell phones told the story. We had photos. We had 400,000 text messages.
It was on Twitter, actually. Just the complete lack of empathy, that was what was so frightening. I mean, it was all out there.
I just didn't understand it at all because I don't think it's something that doesn't occur in other cities and states and counties all over.
If teachers knew about it, if coaches knew about it, if a principal knew about it, if parents knew about it, why was nothing done about that?
The question was, is this football town, putting its daughters at risk by protecting its sons in a situation like this?
I just want to say a quick word. What I really wanted to do, and you'll see that reflected in the materials, is also make a film about rape that doesn't burden the victim, that doesn't make the victim the center of the story, in that we spend so much time, and I know you all know this, really scrutinizing the victim. And so often the victim had to defend herself about what she was wearing and what she did and if she drank and if she knew the guys. And I think obviously all of a victim's healing process is so important, but what felt really important about this film was an opportunity to look at perpetration, so that we can study it and we can understand the language of it and the collusion, and then eradicate it. So that's what's different about Roll Red Roll. Audrey and Daisy is a terrific film, recommended as well. What's different here is the frame is really around the behavior that allows for this to happen. And if we scrutinize that, we can root it out of the locker room. We can root it out of the boardroom, the former White House, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Nancy, so much. Let's go to the audience now. So we're going to advance the slide. So we really believe that this is this is a powerful tool to prevent sexual violence and to be able to make that change. And as Nancy said, to root it out of the locker room, to root it out of the boardroom, to root it out of our communities. So we want to know, what conversations around sport and preventing sexual violence have you been part of in your communities? We'd love to hear from you. I know I'm looking through the participant list. I see several of you who've been involved in doing work with sport and preventing sexual violence. So I'd love to hear in the chat. Go ahead and write down, what have you been doing? What conversations have you been part of or do you know about? And so let's think about ways that we can do that. So I'd love to have people write into the chat. I've seen, as I say, I have been looking through the participant list, so I know a few of you. And so great. So someone's been using 3 different colleges using the Mentors in Violence Prevention MVP program, intervention with student athletes, coaching boys into men. We're doing trainings with universities, more coaching boys into men, which is an MVP. Those are 2 programs that have been using this. Athletes as Leaders, which is a program working with girls around engaging them to be involved in the prevention. More coaching boys into men, and Athletes as Action. People have been working with, I see a lot of people writing down the different places they're doing it. I see a virtual Men Can Stop Rape 3-day training out of Washington, D.C. And so there's peer leaders in their school program, U.S. Center for Safe Sport, and people are writing so quickly, it is hard to be able to catch all of these. But I'm seeing, Nancy, that we have a lot of people here who've been very involved in these efforts to be doing that, and they're really involved in that conversation. And I think this is just going to be a great tool, shifting boundaries and bringing the bystander programming and working, which are other prevention programs. So great, thank you all for sharing that. Let's jump into the next slide. And Tori, Tori, who is part of our team here, was actually part of the process of putting together this toolkit. So Tori, are you going to introduce the next speakers who are going to talk about the toolkit?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So you all will get to hear from me in a little bit, but you'll also get to hear from Eliza, Alice, Coach V, and Lily about the toolkits that we created in order for people to assist people with having conversations with their athletes about preventing violence, using Roll Red Roll as a starting point for that. So filming or having a screening of the film and having discussions about it. So you will hear from Eliza, and Eliza is the impact producer of Roll Red Roll. She has been working on the social issue documentary field for 20 years. She develops and implements engagement strategies to maximize the impact and visibility of documentary films in tandem with their festival and theatrical rollout, community screening tours, broadcasts, and beyond. You'll also hear from Lily. Lily Donnell is the impact coordinator of Roll Red Roll. The experience has solidified her interest in working on documentary films with a social issue focus. New to the field, she continues to broaden her knowledge and experience in social impact and engagement strategy while contributing to projects as a part of the Red Owl team. Alice has worked at the intersection of media and impact for 10 years, collaborating with filmmakers, podcasters, and journalists to leverage stories for social change. And Valencia Peterson, also known as Coach V, is the founder and executive director of Open Door Abuse Awareness Prevention, also called ODAP, a nonprofit organization that endeavors to prevent sexual violence and intimate partner violence through trauma-informed education to youth. So I was super honored to work with you all on this toolkit. And I'm really excited for Eliza to start us off on the conversation about all of the toolkits.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here. Thank you, Tori, and I'm also excited for all of the folks that are here joining us. And as Nancy is, very excited that a number of you have not seen it, and I'm excited for you to see it and use it. to take a step back, I came onto this project as the impact producer as my first project after leaving the film series POV, which is a series that's on PBS. And I was there for 17 years. And while I was there, I worked on over 250 films, looking all social issue based, looking at how to help people not only see the films, but to understand them and work with them on a deeper level. And usually that a lot of that work has to do with providing tools so that people are able to do that. And that typically comes in the form of discussion guides and lesson plans. And Nancy herself is an amazing strategist and impact producer. So actually, when I first saw the film, I was in my other capacity at POV, and I saw it on its opening night at the Tribeca Film Festival to an audience. And the film itself, you just saw the trailer, but for those of you who haven't seen it, it's just so powerful. And it's one of those films that after watching it, you're slightly changed. You understand the world in a slightly different way. And even more so after that, Nancy did a quick Q&A and a discussion and talked about framing it and how, as she just did, about how they really want to use this, how her goal was to use this film for prevention. And that just engaged and energized the room. And I was like so thrilled for this to be able to be the first project that I could really work on. Many of the goals laid out here were already, that you guys have hopefully been reading, were already part of the campaign when I came on, but it was my goal to deepen the partnerships and to help think of ways to even further create tools so that they could be used in classrooms and community groups. So impact producers like me, we kind of understand the power of film and discussion to change hearts and minds, but even further, hopefully attitudes and behavior. And we do this with the help of our partners. So I want to move on to the next slide. Thank you, Tori. And those are part of any good campaign, is working with people that understand the issue and are working on the day-to-day. And we were so lucky to have so many great partners that were there to help inform it, including, and I know some of you are here, and thank you, and you've been here along the way. It's on us. It's I Have the Right To, End Rape on Campus, Vital Voices. And we gathered all at Promundo, we gathered all of our partners to help us craft the campaign, and they've been with us to carry it through, to come on board and kind of ratify the goals that had already been set forth. And we were like, definitely, there were some surprises along the way, but pretty much we were told that we were right on target, which was gratifying. And then of course, like, our core partners, some of our core partners are the folks that we are co-presenting with today. The folks at Prevent Connect, Reliance, Calcasa, ODAP, and Joe Samelin from Men Challenging. And I would say that through the brain trust of partners, they helped us shape the goals, and they reviewed our guides along the way, our lesson plans, help us spread the word about hosting screenings, and helped us create these audience surveys so that we could measure how the film and these discussions were changing people's hearts and minds. So next slide, Tori. Thrilled that there was an overwhelming response to the film and the events. And I mean, you can see there were 200 screenings, the number of partners, but kind of the numbers that really jump out to me on this slide, apologies, The numbers that really jump out to me on this slide are those audience survey numbers. The 67% of those surveyed that say they see themselves educating their peers about consent, and the 77% of attendees surveyed who are inspired to talk to their friends about bystander intervention. And it was those tools we went back to our partners and it was those stats that we kind of went back to our partners and we said, gosh, how can, we were so excited. And it was like, how can we create a tool to even more effectively reach the core audience of student athletes? We love the guide, which you'll hear more about, which from Joe Samelin, who wrote it, from Men Challenging. And we wanted to adapt that guide so that it could be used in schools at both the high school and college level. We spoke to the NCAA to find out how colleges were completing the sexual violence prevention mandatory training, with the hopes, so that we wanted to make a tool that would really be used and would be used. So the feedback that we received from them was that there would definitely be an opportunity for more use if we created tracks that could be completed in shorter amounts of time, ideally a 50 to 60 minute training. So if you want to move on to the next slide, Tori. Reliance and ODAP kind of came on board early to help us to adapt the guide that we currently had into the toolkit so that it could be more effectively used with student athletes in classroom settings. And here's the table of contents, and you'll see that there's a lot more than just the clips in the discussion. There are resources, and if you move to the next slide, you'll see the facilitation tips. And it really, if you see there, it really kind of walks folks through the steps with tips and tricks so that people feel really comfortable working with it. And then if you want to move on to the next slide, we ultimately created two toolkits, one for the college level and one for the high school level. And you'll find out more in depth about them after I'm done speaking. But I did want to let you know how to find the toolkit specifically. And you can access both of them through the Roll Red Roll site, which is rollredrollfilm.com. And on the next slide, there is the high school guide, which when you click on the high school guide, you will come to a form on our site, and it just asks for some information about you, and then we will send you a copy of the PDF and get you the clips that are associated with it. If you choose the college guide, which has many more clips and tracks and options, you'll be linked out to our educational distributor site here, and you'll be able to access it from there. So it's now my distinct pleasure to pass the mic on, the virtual mic on to Valencia Patterson, Coach V, to talk a little bit about the Dear Coach letter and the 4 R's.
Thank you, Eliza. So the Dear Coach letter, first of all, hello, everybody. This can feel like a little bit impersonal with all of you out there, but hello, first of all. And I want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing, right? And to some of the people out there that are my partners and that I work with, shout out to you guys, Jess and Bernie. The coaching toolkit, the high school toolkit, let me just start off with the first thing I wrote in that, and that is a letter to the coaches. I'm a football coach. I teach I do high school football, and I going into writing this toolkit, was very aware of coaches' time, right? And I also implement coaching boys into men, shout out to Futures. I really understood going into this what it would take to get a coach to buy into something like this. And I also want to say that I believe heavily in the role that the coaches play when it comes to getting these things across to their players. So you're going to see the movie, 50% of you haven't seen it yet, but when you see this movie, take a look at the coach and how he is, and then understand that how important it is to have a coach buying into these principles that we're talking about here, which is prevention and sexual assault, right? So my starting off with just my letter to the coaches, thanking them, you know, totally applauding them for the position they put themselves in to be mentors, father figures, and also encouraging them and giving them the tools that they need to be able to implement or show this film in a timely manner. Because as you will see when you watch this film is pretty lengthy. And coaches will always say, well, I don't have enough time for this. I have barely enough time to do with my players and the season's coming up and all that. Trust me, I know. But the coach's letter is just an introduction and a reassurance that we would make the most of their time, if you will. So that's the first thing that I did in putting together this toolkit is make sure that we honor and give due diligence to the people that we want to be able to put in their hands to put to our kids. So that's the first and foremost thing I wanted to say about the toolkit. And I'm not sure if I should go deeply into this right now. I'll gladly do it, but is that where you want, is that where we're heading with this? Somebody tell me.
I think,
Tori?
yeah, I think for the sake of time, Coach V,
Okay.
this letter is fantastic, and I think it does call a lot on how coaches can really set the tone from the top for their students. And with what Eliza talked about with the before screening tips, you know, we really encourage folks, if they need assistance or they want an advocate or a preventionist in the room, you know, please like find your local rape crisis center through the Reliance search engine, where we have all the rape crisis centers listed out. Look for your local Title IX coordinator if you're on a campus, preventionists on your campus. But there's also a lot that coaches can do on their own too. And Coach V, I think you wanted to talk about your 4 R's that anyone can use, but especially in light of screening this film with athletes. How do these 4 R's help people have these conversations and really build a culture that prioritizes preventing sexual violence?
Now, my 4 R's, I'm trying to think, what do I say about my 4 hours? What about my 4 R's? I would say that, you know, I think it's important to say that we need to make sure, first and foremost, right, this is a heavy film, right? So we want to make sure that we pad this to the point where we give the kids that we're going to show this to room to digest it, first and foremost, right? And then I think we want to make sure that, you know, as we're working with our young people, giving them the benefit of the doubt that they are going to receive this in a way that they want to do something about it, right? Not assuming that just the kids that are, you know, ready to do these kinds of things. Let's assume the best about them. So when it comes to the four R's, exactly what is that again? I can't even remember. It's been so long. What are you referring to specifically, Tori? So I'm not going off.
Yeah, we're talking about the 4 R's of being trauma informed: realize, recognize, respond, and resist re-traumatization.
That's right. That's right. Okay, I'm sorry about that, guys. But yeah, first of all, realize that this is a traumatic thing that occurred to her, right? And then we're going to recognize that, you know, every person that's going to look at this is going to deal with it differently. They're going to deal with it totally differently. Like when I was showing this film to my players, you know, I had players in there that had passed pictures around of girls who had all of a sudden, due to the film, come to a realization of what they had done and the weight of it, right? But you would think, wouldn't they know that was wrong before? But you'd be surprised the kind of things that go on if it's normal in a setting. you'd be surprised the way they just accept it as the normal thing to do. But it was good to be able to recognize that they recognized that they had done something wrong, and then dealing with them, and then responding to them in a way of not condemning, but making sure that they understand what their actions cause, the consequences of it. So I think we'll get more into that as we go on, as far as, you know, using this film, being aware of the effect that it's going to have on those you're showing, and just being able to respond rightly to it. So, you know, leave yourself open as you watch this film, and protect yourself. Self-care, by the way, for the 50% of you that's going to watch this film today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Coach V. And I just really appreciate you going through all of that, because I think just those four items that you have are so key to having these conversations, no matter your setting, but especially for folks who maybe aren't used to having these conversations. What are some important things for them to keep in mind as they talk about sexual violence with their athletes? And you've got Tanisha in the chat saying, I appreciate Coach V mentioning self-care. Working in this field, it's super important.
It is. I want to say something else real quick. I'm a little bit conventional with these things. The person that said she's going to watch it with her daughters today, I think that's really good. But remember, I mean, as you're doing it, it's going to be a good, encouraging thing for them, but it's also going to be something that they're going to process a little differently from you. I just want to say that. So be prepared for that. They're going to process it a little different.
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember the feelings that I had the first time I watched it too. And self-care is super important. So, for folks who are considering screening this with college students, we wanted to take a couple minutes for both toolkits, but we'll start with the college one and just kind of give like a sneak peek, like an overview of how to use the toolkit. So we have this great kind of choose your own adventure map. So there's a few different ways that folks can use the college toolkit, because we know that the time that you have with your athletes can vary a lot depending on the sport, what college or university you're at, and just your students' readiness too. So there are two main pathways that folks can use the toolkit and screening the film for college athletes. One is to show the entire film with your student athletes and discuss. And one way to do that is by having one long session where you show the film in its 80-minute entirety and have one long discussion. We know this is something that folks do a lot and is very common, and what folks have been doing with the discussion guide that Eliza mentioned earlier, and that we'll hear more about from Joe a little bit later in the web conference. But we also recognize that when you are working on prevention education with student athletes, sometimes you either don't have the time to carve out one long session, one long discussion, but we also know, those of us who are prevention educators, that you need more than one session to have social change. So we also have the option for folks to show the film in smaller session with shorter and more frequent discussions, like 30 minutes a week, or every other week, whatever works best within your season. We also realize that, especially for college athletes that are in the NCAA system, that you have very limited time with your athletes. And we also want to acknowledge that prevention education can absolutely be part of that limited time. So when you go over to the other side of the choose your own adventure map, this is where the toolkit also really comes into play, where we split out the clips in thematic tracks. So in these thematic tracks, you're not showing the entire film, you're showing sections of it that have to do with one of the four key themes of the film and how it relates to how coaches, athletic administrators, and athletes can prevent sexual violence. So within the college toolkit, there are 4 thematic tracks with about 6 clips, so 6 sessions sprinkled throughout. And those themes, those tracks are sports culture, supporting survivors, technology and sexual violence, and engaging men and boys. Those of you who are familiar with the CDC's technical packages, I'm sure can see how this relates to that work. But you all know your students and your athletes best. You know which theme would likely resonate the most with your students and create the most momentum and capacity for sexual violence prevention change. So there are several ways to use this college toolkit to prevent violence on campuses with your athletes. And we're just going to walk through really quickly an example track. So that the example that we're using is the one of sport culture. Each of the tracks in the college toolkit come with its own set of learning objectives just to help guide the conversations and have some goals right out front. Oops. And this is the general structure of what each of the tracks looks like. So in this track, there are 6 sessions, and these sessions are about 20 minutes each, keeping in mind that the discussions can go as long as the facilitators, whether that's coaches, athletic administrators, or they have a preventionist or advocate with them to help, however long they want them to go. So the first couple of sessions are pretty standard throughout the toolkit. You know, we don't want to throw people out of the frying pan into the fire if they haven't discussed sexual violence before to immediately talk about how does sports culture intersect with sexual violence prevention. We want to bring everybody up to a common understanding about sexual assault and victim blaming, as well as how to address victim blaming too. And then you'll see that we highlighted session 3 on this slide, just so folks can see kind of an example of what are the discussion questions that people are talking about specific to these themes and tracks. So some of the questions include, how can coaches and athletes be better role models to prevent violence? What do athletes need from their coaches and other adult mentors to feel safe and empowered to speak out against violence and to prevent sexual violence? And then the remaining sessions in this track of the toolkit will focus on how some of those other themes intersect with this core theme of sports culture. And we always want to make sure that we end on a session that empowers the athletes, the coaches, the athletic administrators, that they are agents of cultural change to prevent violence in all of the spaces that they work in. And for those of you who've seen the film and have seen the ending of the film, I think there's a lot of really great opportunities there that people talk about how they want to see the culture change, so that way they're supportive of survivors and preventing sexual violence. So that was really quick and brief with the college toolkit. Coach V, I want to bring it back to you. Maybe you can give us a walkthrough of the high school toolkit.
Sure. Again, because it's high school, I recommend highly clips. I don't see, based on my experience with coaches, unless they put that chunk of time aside, the best way, and not to mention, I feel like when it comes to high school teens, young men, you know, sitting still for that long of a time, you could lose some valuable lessons that you would get otherwise if you broke it up into chunks, you know? So I highly recommend, if you're gonna do this with the team, high school football team, that you do it by topic. And I also think that when it comes to doing it, even though this is sports related, for those of you, you say, is it just for sports? Absolutely not. I mean, you're looking at a community here, right? You're looking at a community, and you can capitalize on that throughout this whole film. You could talk about how the community reacted, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we want our children, our kids to be activists, if you will, to take a stand in the community. So there's all kinds of ways that you can bring different things in to make a point and have a teachable moment, although this is geared towards sports. So I highly recommend breaking it up and building a theme, if you will, around that session and bringing in as much as possible, because they will relate to it. They will relate to it. And it's basically a lot what Tori said, you know, questions to get them thinking, follow-up questions, if you will. It's the same kind of layout as all that Tori said, so I won't belabor that and repeat all of that. But I especially just really feel like, and I've seen this because I've shown this a few times to a number of high school football teams. And I've seen the reaction that they have to this. And I've based on that, I wrote the toolkit, knowing what would keep their attention, right? Picking out certain things that I knew that they would be able to relate with. So when you're showing it, you're going to have so many teachable moments there with that film. And again, I strongly believe, like when I showed this movie to like 6 football teams, I showed half of the movie, right? When I first showed it to them, I showed them half and I sent them out to play. I know that sounds crazy, right? But they needed time to decompress. They needed time to hear what they heard. Then I brought them back in to see the other half. And this is me showing it all the way through. I believe in play therapy, by the way. That's a whole nother trauma thing I believe in for guys. But so that's one of the ways that I wanted it to sit with them. And so I wrote that toolkit in the mind of having an opportunity and breaking it up so it would sit with them for a while. So that's what I'll say about the toolkit and my perspective of writing it.
Thanks, Coach V. And we'll hear a little bit more about your perspective towards the end too, because you have done this so much with your teams and have had some really great conversations and impact come out of that too. So just wanted to call folks' attention to the several themes that are represented in the high school toolkit. And there's also a really great conversation going on in the chat about how Coach V, like you said, folks can connect this beyond their communities too. Sexual violence is not unique to a sports environment. So it's definitely something that people can talk about beyond sports and into communities as well, while also honoring the experiences of survivors of various identities in the room, not in the room, or just broadly in our communities too. So thank you everyone in the chat for bringing out your wisdom as we're walking through this toolkit too. So the toolkit ends with a call to action talking about the many ways that someone can challenge sexual assault and rape, and talks about these very specific strategies that, again, I'm sure are not unfamiliar to folks. Eliza, do you want to chime in really quick and talk about some other opportunities for engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. We are really excited. There is a researcher at the University of Washington who we met through the NCAA, who is interested in doing a research project on this film. And so, on the toolkit and the efficacy of the toolkit. And so we're looking for coaches, athletic administrators, Title IX coordinators, folks in the college specifically with the college toolkit that would like to participate in this pilot. And I'm happy to tell you more about it. Hop on a call with any of you. If you're interested, email. There's 2 emails there. One is our film production at gmail.com. The other is info@rollergirlfilm.com, or I'm also Eliza@rollergirlfilm.com. And we'd love, Joe is going to talk more about it, but essentially we would provide you with a copy of the college toolkit and ask that the surveys be taken before and after, and then you'd be part of the pilot study. So reach out if you're interested.
Great. Thanks, Eliza. That's a great option for folks who feel like they may want a little more support as they embark on this brand new toolkit. And we are so excited to follow up with more information about how that study goes. So really excited. David, do you want to ask the next text chat question of our audience? And then we'll quickly move on to letting Joe and Coach V talk about their experiences with screening this film and having discussions with their athletes.
Okay, great. And I see so much experience that people have in our audience here. So let's go ahead and I'd like to know, what creative ideas do you have for fitting these toolkits into the connections and the prevention programs you're doing. So just want to get an idea. What ideas do you have on how you can use this toolkit and have this fit into the sport programs or the programs that you're trying to reach? So I'd love to get some ideas from each of you to think about how you can be able to doing this. I've already seen several people talking about it. Mike Fonda says they're inspired us to use this knowledge to educate others, including their children. And I think he was talking earlier about doing some work with incarcerated individuals, and he's been using this case study of the Steubenville case to have that conversation with people, not just with athletes, but also there. So seeing if there are ways to adapt it to a community with low readiness. And so I think that there's actually an interesting opportunity that because it's a film, it creates an anchor that allows a way to be able to talk about something that's not about what they're doing, but to be able to help do that. And so that's an anchor to move forward. Works with schools, provide education during health classes, but great to work with them to provide training to student athletes as well. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and Taylor Ellsworth, they have a movie passport event. Using this for Sexual Assault Awareness Month, which is in April. Use this with college students, with being able to do that. Partnering with local sports teams to have community screening as a fundraiser for a local survivor support organization. Using this with our teen peer educator interns so they can create a teen-led campaign for Sexual Assault Awareness Month every month. Looking for ways to ensure content is culturally relevant for racially marginalized populations. I'm a high school coach and a prevention educator. My wheels are churning and I'm very excited about getting things going in my community. That's great to hear. Working with athletes for consent education at the college to promote awareness. So often you'll find that there's athletes that are really interested and might be really great that having them being part of the hosting of the event. Training for school administrators and sports principals, school board members, athletic administrators. I think that this is an important piece. And so these are just some of the ideas. So thank you all. Let's move on to Joe. Joe Similian, who's with Men Challenging, and back to Coach V. We want to have you talk a little bit more about some of the ways that this is being incorporated. So I think we're handing it off to Joe next.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. And I'm just going to hope/assume y'all can hear me. It's weird to think of how many awesome people are out there that I can't see, but I'm going to trust that this is real and you're all out there. I want to say a quick thank you to Dave and everybody at Reliance, Tori, and everyone for putting this together today. And especially Nancy and the Roll Red Roll team for bringing me on board. When Nancy first reached out to me about this film, and I've known Nancy, as she mentioned, for a minute now, I was right on board. When I first saw the film, as someone who, like I think a lot of people here, has spent decades now speaking with high school students, college students, and a whole range of communities, and especially my field of expertise, which is men's engagement. So helping communities get men and boys involved and talking about gender roles and how that relates to gender-based violence and inequity, et cetera. I hadn't seen a resource like this, and I know I'm biased because I'm on the Roll Red Roll team at the moment and working with it, but it really is true. There's a lot of stuff, conversations that many of us have led and had and struggled with around masculinity and what it means to be a real man, about sports culture, about gender violence in general. The film really hits it so powerfully, and in a way that I kind of always wanted but didn't know I wanted, as an educator, as a trainer, as a facilitator, and just as a dude who cares about this stuff. So really appreciate, Nancy, you for the time and energy you put in making it and then sharing it the way that you have. All that said, I wanted to just take a second, and from that kind of perspective of someone who has these conversations and does prevention work or other ways of addressing gender violence, this is just 5 of the many, many kind of key concrete goals that through hosting and facilitating community screenings, campus screenings, and a bunch of other ways I've worked with the team behind Roll Red Roll and the film itself in different communities. These are some of the ways that I think concretely you all as advocates, educators, human beings, et cetera, community members can, these are just 5 of the ways that you can, that the film can be a good resource, and that you can get the most out of using it in whatever way or context you use it. One, it can be a really good way to gauge where a room or a community or a sports team or a group or whoever is at, right? So one of the first campus-based screenings we held of it, kind of get feedback from it, was University of Wisconsin, one of the campuses in Wisconsin. And we were lucky enough to hook up with their football team at their football team orientation before the semester began. They go through a 2-day process of just orientation for all the players, the team members, new and old. And part of it is kind of like character building stuff. And they agreed to invite us, me, to come facilitate the film screening, the full film, and a discussion afterwards. And it was really great. I pushed to have, since I know some of the folks in the area who do this work, both on campus and off campus, locally with nonprofits around sexual violence prevention, I asked if we could invite them to the room as well, just to participate and be there and build connections, and they agreed, which was a really important part of that screening. But what we learned from it was really powerful too. And one of the things about this film as a resource, and the toolkit backs it up with a lot of how it's written and how we put it together, is that one of the key things in engaging men and doing this work in general is meeting people where they're at, right? You got to meet men, you got to meet people where they're at. Some people are ready for advanced, nuanced discussions on how to be as inclusive as possible in terms of race and orientation and gender. And some people are like still at the very beginning victim blaming stage of addressing rape and sexual violence. And sometimes they're the same person. We got to own that too. We're all as part of this learning process, right? So all that to say, with University of Wisconsin, one of the questions we ask, it's in the toolkit, and this helped guide the creation of the toolkit, was, after watching the film, who do you think has responsibility for what happened? A young woman was sexually assaulted by more than one person. A lot of people knew about it before, during, and after it happening. A lot of stuff went on. You'll see it if you haven't seen the film yet. Who do we think is responsible, right? No right or wrong answer. Let's just throw it out there. And right off the bat, the first, it was about 110 football players in the room, along with all the staff, the admin from the team, the coaches, et cetera, and the local advocates and activists. And right off the bat, it was Jane Doe's parents. It was the survivors' parents were responsible, really mostly because this was a young woman who was out at a party drinking with older boys, and et cetera, et cetera. And me, being the activist and feminist I am, bit my tongue a bit to immediately jump on that and said, all right, interesting. Let me throw it out to the group. Anyone else? Agree, disagree? And immediately another hand shot up, and I was in my head, I was like, oh, thank God. And I called on that young guy, and he said, no, it's not the parents' fault. That's ridiculous. And I was like, all right, well, who do you think it is? And he said, no, it's obviously Jane Doe's fault. She's 16. She's a teenager. She knows better. She should have known better, et cetera, et cetera. So we I breathed, I let that. This was an opportunity for us to evaluate the film. It wasn't really a facilitating deep, long conversation opportunity. So I did the best I could with the limited time we had with each question. But what this does is the film, for a couple of key reasons I just want to mention, and again, we developed the toolkit to take advantage of this, of how well the film is made on these issues. The film is really good, and the toolkit is really good as both a standalone thing to watch and spark discussion, but also is exponentially more powerful as a resource with folks that know what they're doing and have a bit of experience. And the toolkit is designed for people with zero experience talking about these issues, and 100% experience. And no one has 100%. I know, we're all still learning. But it also highlights, because this is a true story, because this is real, and we are seeing in a documentary film what happened, it captures everything from the very, very subtle parts of rape culture to the very, very overt stuff, like the sexual assault that happened, and the discussion about it, and the jokes that were made, and the videos that were taken, et cetera, and everything in between. So you can, with the toolkit and with the video, go really deep and subtle and nuanced, or very, very overt and intentional with any of the themes that are listed throughout the toolkit. And that could be really powerful and helpful, hopefully, as you all are trying to either do this in one shots for 15 minutes or work with coaches to integrate this into classes that the athletes take over a semester or two. I think that some of the other keys, creating space for supporting survivors. A lot of folks really react well to some of the survivor speak out scenes and the rallies that are in the film and shown around this case that took place in Steubenville. Not uncommon when talking about these issues in general, but I've had a lot of people reach out to me in the moment, pre-pandemic, when we were doing in-person screenings, as well as afterwards online, virtually, et cetera, people reaching out to disclose either they themselves experienced something similar or that they know someone who did, and echoing Coach V about a warning about the intensity of the film and just a heads up and taking care of yourselves before and during and after watching it. Also to make sure that any time or place you use this, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, to make sure that you've got resources ready and available for people who might make connections or realize things or finally be able to disclose something happening. I will say on another note too, the power of it being a true story, both the blogger in the film who plays a large role in the film and myself were contacted after a screening by the father of a young woman near to Steubenville where almost the exact same thing had happened to her. And he saw the film. And his daughter had disclosed to him, and so he wanted to know what he could do, and he got involved, and we spoke for a while. So there's a lot of different connections and things that can come out of using the toolkit, being ready to have that kind of, whether it's an informal quick conversation or a more thought out deeper conversation with it as well. There's one scene in the film that sticks out to me, and I've seen it 8 million times now, and I see something new every time. But there's one scene, and it wasn't me that caught it. It was a colleague of mine, Ileana, who's an incredible activist and teacher, at Feminist Teacher. Go connect with her on all the platforms. But she caught it out. It was the police interview, a detective interviewing the football coach. And the football coach was making the case to the cop that, well, maybe we should have different language for rape, and if it's not so serious, and if it's kind of serious. And at one point, he kind of leans in with this kind of old boy network kind of thing and puts his hand on the detective's knee and says, you know what I'm saying, right? And it was just such a powerful moment. It's tiny, it's subtle. I missed it the first 100 times I saw it, but Ileana called it out. And in that moment is so much about masculinity, is so much about rape culture, is so much about how most of us don't commit rape as men, but most of us stay silent about it or kind of collude with it, cover it up, whether we are aware of it, intend to or not. And I think that's where the power of the film, and then using the toolkit to really catch those moments and use them, can be such a powerful tool, even if it's just clips, although I'm sure Nancy would prefer everyone go out and get all their friends to see the whole film. And I recommend the same wholeheartedly. And on the action piece, I'm a huge proponent of taking action. My men's engagement work, I don't do anything without attaching some kind of small, medium, or large action to it. And there's a lot of ways you can connect to it, including some suggestions in the toolkits, but work it into, and I'm not even going to say anything about action because we already had like 50 suggestions here from you all, smarter than I can probably do about this. But it's a really powerful toolkit, and we're excited to be a part of it. And as a resource, the film and the toolkit can really fit into, I think, anything you all are doing, regardless, and I know this was in the chat, but regardless of whether you're working with athletes or not, youth or not, I mean, the film itself is powerful because it's hyper specific. It's a specific case in a specific town with specific people of specific races and religions and socioeconomic status, et cetera. But because of the way Nancy did it, and because we don't have any, and this is another piece that I think is so important about the film, there are no talking heads in it. You don't have me or David Lee or Coach V or anyone else in the film explaining stuff and putting words like rape culture and intimate partner violence out there, which of course is a positive. Yay experts and yay expert data and science. But at the same time, it makes it so much more accessible, especially for young guys, in my experience, and especially young male athletes who are so ready to be defensive about any of this before you open your mouth, as many of you know. So I'm sure I have a lot more to say. I'm from New York City, so I could talk forever. So I'm going to pause it there, but I'm going to throw my email in the chat as well. And if folks have any questions about any of this and engaging men in general and the work I do with Men Challenging, which is a campaign I have to help come up with creative ideas to get men involved, please let me know. And yeah, thank you all again for the work you're doing and for bringing me here too.
Thank you,
so much.
Joe. Why don't we go back to Coach V, and can you talk about some of your, back to some of the evaluation and there's that you've done about this and some of the impact that you've seen?
Yeah. Well, I'm sitting here thinking about when I showed this film to the different football teams that I showed this to. And, you know, this occurred in 2012. I showed this to a bunch of teams in 2019. So in that time frame, you know, lots of things have gone on. There's been more awareness to this kind of thing. You know, oh my gosh, there's been so much kind of awareness to this when it comes to just, you know, the guy that raped the girl and got 6 months in prison, you know, for this, some of you know what I'm talking about. So these things were in the news and have been in the news, right? Prior to even showing this. So now we have a football team that may have heard of these things, right? We're coming from an urban context. So I'm put a few things in here for you to think about. Coming from an urban context, we have young people who've heard about sexual assault and how bad it is. And then by this time, here now we're putting it to them, a football team, mind you, although, by the way, this film is for any team, right? Any team. Let's make that clear. And everybody can learn something from this. So don't think it's just football, right? But, you know, bring it into the context of 2019. One of the things that I was really trying to get out this movie, believe it or not, this film for my players, and this is it. It wasn't so much that sexual assault was wrong, because they know it's wrong. A lot of them know it's wrong. Since 2012 to 2019, there's been a lot in the news. A lot, they know it's wrong. My main goal in showing this and hope was that I would see a change in the bystander thing. I wanted to see young men stand up and say, that's not happening on my watch, right? So this is the kind of thing I was trying to get out of my players. Just assuming, you know, this is wrong to touch a girl when she didn't ask you to touch her, drunk or not. You know, so I came from a different place when it came to showing my guys this film, being open, right, to whatever they was going to regurgitate back to me. I found myself in situations where a young man had come on a team and he was the former boyfriend of one of the coach's daughter. And he himself had taken pictures of the coach's daughter and put it on the internet, right? Which was very interesting in this setting because now he's his coach. Now they've gone through this whole thing of getting this right and working this thing out. But I had to be able to say, hey, coach, we're about to show this movie. And let me just back up and say, don't show this to your team if you haven't seen it first. Like, look at it first and then show it to your team so that you can prep some folk. And I was able to prep the coach in there, like what you're about to see will probably really hit home in a way, you know, I just want you to know that what we're about to see is something you've gone through already, and you may not, you know, I was just trying to forewarn him. He decided to leave and not watch this with us, but the young man did watch it. And so that was something to be aware of. So I took the approach of, we need to stop being silent, young men. We need to speak up and stand up and speak up and be heard and make sure that your fellow brother on your team is not the one allowed to get away with this kind of thing. Just think if somebody had spoke up, you know, as soon as that picture was shown on the internet, had jumped in there and go, oh, what's going on here? And so my goal was to make that happen. That was my hope, and that's what I was after. So in some of the showings of it, you know, I heard some things, and I realized too, that was one of the areas that needed to be addressed more so because of the people around them and their other peers. There was stuff that was out there that they did that they normalized, like things like that, sharing these photos. But when I was able to, through the film, show them the damaging effect of that, I was really glad to see the response. Now, I don't know where we are with the slides, but I definitely want to be able to show you some of the work that we did with our players. When I was with my players, I took the liberty of taking a survey, a before and after, pre and post survey. I asked some questions about, you know, seeing this film, or no, not so much seeing this film. I asked questions about around the area of, you know, showing nude pictures, or your friend doing something unseemly to a girl. How would you feel about it? Like, I broke these different things down in my questions to them. And I was very pleased with some of my responses. And now I just want to show this slide, the next slide here, 46. Can we go to that slide? Are we there?
We're there. We've got all your results showing. The before.
Right. So, okay, I can't see because I'm looking at this screen and that. But the idea is, when I first, one of the questions that I wanted to get across here was, how likely are you to do something to try and stop what happens if a friend or another guy is showing other people's sexual messages or naked sexual pictures of a girl on the cell phone or on the internet? Now, when I first presented this to my players, this is the kind of response. Now, this was, they weren't likely, you know, they weren't doing too much to stop it. This was before they actually saw the film. And then after they saw the film, we saw a change in that response. Now it went up. Now the responses changed, because they happened. I think that film made them see, you know, step back and like get the big picture, the cause and effect of what would happen and what did happen there. And then two, the power that they had to change that narrative, right? So even in this film, I'm looking to empower my players, right, to do better. Even in this, looking for them to be empowered to do better, to make a better choice, to make a difference. And that's something I strongly, strongly felt in working with my young men that I wanted to be able to do, you know. And then, and I couple things together, because not one thing, right, always works. So what I did was, after that, coming into the Coaching Boys and the Men play into this, they have a pledge that young men take as far as not to hurt a woman. So after I showed my film, the next thing I did was, who here wants to take this pledge not to hurt a woman? And resoundingly, young men stood up to take this pledge. And the beautiful thing about ODAP and the work that we're doing is that these young men that we're working with, we're still working with, we're still holding accountable, we're still following, because our motto in ODAP is quality over quantity, and we don't love them and leave them. So some of the same teams I've been working with for 3 years. As a matter of fact, one of the young men that I first started working with, the 9th grade, is actually becoming the vice president on my board like next month. So with ODAP, when we get involved with teams in general, we try to stay with that team and stay with those young men and walk with those young men. So these young men who makes pledge, we bring them and hold them back accountable, and they keep in touch with us. So again, it's one thing, and I'm gonna have to say this because that's just who I am. It's one thing to show this film. It is one thing to get a response. It's another thing to follow up, right? For those same young people that we're getting this film out to. So it's a relationship building thing when it comes to these young men. And to this day, I kid you not, I get texts and messages. I'm in a situation, right? I'm in a situation. What should I do? I feel like the other day I got a Jordan, a young man named Jordan, and I met him a while ago, and he's hitting in my instant messages, says, I need to be a better man. And I showed him this film. He was one of the ones that was quick to take a pledge. And he reached out to me and said, I feel myself slipping. You know, I have a girl and I feel myself slipping. That to me, this film is a segue catalyst for those kinds of conversations that last a lifetime with these young men. So if you're going to start doing this well, a lot of you are already doing it, you know, I'm preaching to the choir, but in doing this work and bringing up such heavy issues, make sure that you're still available. I would say that. Make sure you're still available to those same young men you bring this up to. You know, especially with young men of color, you know, that I work with, I'm especially building bridges with them all the time in this area, because You know, a lot of times for them, all they have to do is be accused of doing something and they're guilty. So it's important that they especially keep themselves out of compromising situations. So in showing this film, it was the beginning of what could he have done better? What should have happened? You know what should have happened? What should have happened is as soon as you saw that picture, right, you should have blown the whistle. Keep yourself out of trouble. And you know, I use a number of different things to get the point across. And I really feel, again, watching this in chunks is going to give them the chance to digest. Because if you know, right now we're in this media thing and everything, lots of voices all the time. And we just got to make everything be still so that they can hear what we're saying. So the chunks and the little sections of this film is beautiful to be able to do. And I hope all that makes sense.
Thank you so much. We're at our last minute, so we don't have enough. So we'd love for people just to write in. How are you planning to use Roll Red Roll toolkits to prevent sexual violence in your communities? We are running in our last minute, so we're going to move to the next slide. So I would love to have people write down what they're doing in the chat. What are they doing? I want to we don't have time for much Q&A, but I really want to thank Nancy Schwartzman, Coach V, Joseph Millian, Eliza Licht, and we also had, as you saw in the chat, Alice Quinlan and Lily Donnell for sharing and all the great work in developing this. Please keep in contact of what you're being able to do to make a difference. And then we'll go to the next slide here. There is the high school request form on the Roll Red Roll website, so you can get that there. Just fill out that form and get that at no cost. The college toolkit's available on the full film platforms website, so you can be able to get the college toolkit that's more this. And thank you so much for that. And there's so many great chats here going in, and want to thank you on behalf of Reliance and Prevent Connect, the team. You had Tori and Ashley for being able to do this. Follow us. Reliance has a whole bunch of work that we've been doing on the Roll for Sport to be able to prevent sexual violence. And thank all of you for the work that you are doing in your communities to make the world a safer place and a better place. Together we can end sexual violence. We know that prevention does work, and that this provides an important tool that's going to be part of building those relationships, as Coach V talked about, that we can do to make a difference. So thank you all for joining us. We look forward to seeing you in the future. Do join us for other events, and we will be talking to you then. So thank you all, and have a great day, everyone.